Welcome to the EVready Podcast, featuring industry leaders and their perspectives on electrification, hosted by EVready Energy. Hey everybody, welcome to the EVready Podcast. I am grateful to have on today Bernie Erickson, Chief Marketing Officer at FSG, and Chris Anastasi, Director of EV Sales. FSG and EVready are partnering related to BMW's EV charging program, helping dealers get ready for EV charging needs across the United States. And we wanted to just have a discussion to introduce everybody to our two companies and how we're working together. I think that the folks over at FSG, just their intelligence as it relates to energy efficiency and their experience in the installation space is incredibly strong within the industry. And we want to have a discussion about how we're helping folks take the next steps in order to make sure that they're electrifying their locations in the most optimal way. So guys, thanks so much for joining the podcast today.
Thanks for having us.
So, you guys have a history with BMW. You've been working with the company for a long time. And that's kind of, what got you to become an approved partner within the BMW EV charging program is kind of, your execution over the past year. So tell us a little bit about your relationship and how it got to where it is today with BMW.
Sure. Yeah. So we've been involved in the car dealership market in general for many years, particularly on lighting and electrical, because lighting is critical to car dealers. And back to the metal halide days, and then to maintaining those systems to make the cars look right, and the LED days, converting over and doing energy efficiency projects. We've been very involved in the car dealer market in general and had relationships with many BMW dealers. We're also big on the manufacturing side, on the OEM side, with multiple manufacturers, having done major retrofits in Ford and GM factories, helping on the Tesla build-outs of their factories, and interfaced as well with BMW down in South Carolina as we work down there. So we've kind of crossed paths in many different ways, if you will. And, we're one of the bigger and few companies that can do a full U.S. footprint of offering a really consistent deliverable across the United States. And that's one of the first times that BMW reached out to us, even doing their own facilities in their distribution centers. And it just kind of segued in. So kind of made us a good fit.
Awesome. So Chris Anastasi, you have been in the EV charging industry for several years now, which is it's like dog years in this industry. So tell us a little bit about your background in the industry, and then talk to us specifically about car dealerships and the breadth of services that FSG is offering at car dealerships that makes you guys so valuable in the marketplace.
So for starters, I worked for a manufacturer of EV charging about almost 4 years ago now. And then eventually I had gone to a new company that was doing EVcast, which is called Charging as a Service. And then, Bernie called me up and he had said, "Hey, we have an opportunity here. I'd like you to interview." And Bernie and I have known each other for well over a decade now. So it was a really good fit on my side to come work for FSG. And it's been a great experience, since. And so as I've talked with Bernie a little bit, we've worked with BMW previously, as Bernie's mentioned. We have the ability to be an installer and a supplier, which means we can implement a turnkey approach. And of course, what's very important is that we have the ability to stage the material in storage and deliver it in a timely manner. So as Bernie mentioned earlier, we've worked for OEMs. We've done countless installs for Penske. We've done many charging dealerships. We've actually worked again with BMW even before the rollout. So that's what kind of makes us more of a unique partner than the others, that we have that ability. And have every state covered for EV charging, for installation and for sales.
Cool. Okay. Now, this is just such a timely discussion. I want to have it. Like, usually I try and steer clear of politics, but here we are. Election was last week. We found out who the new president's going to be. And it's a really interesting dichotomy. It's somebody who has historically been anti-EV in Trump, partnering very closely with probably the most pro-EV person that has impacted the industry in the world, which is Elon. And so I just want to have a discussion with you guys. Like, what do you think this means for EV charging over the next, let's call it 4 years? I guess that's a good time period to talk about it. And how do you think this ends up impacting how things kind of progress in the US over the next few years?
Well, I'll start if you want. You could look at it in multiple different ways. You're right. I mean, Elon definitely changes the complexion of how I would have answered that question, a bit ago. But, where you really, for all of us, I don't see the EV train slowing down, right? But where subsidies are involved and dollars are flowing, a lot of what's really affecting car dealerships, and money that is impacting them is really coming from utilities and ratepayers, electric companies that have really made that pledge, and it varies by state to state to really cut down on fossil fuel use of all types, right? And where the subsidies are coming back out. Where you would wonder is, and what I've read and I'm not that I'm an expert on anything, but you would have to wonder about the NEVI and the building out, where the IRA money has been allocated. I've heard, the statements that he's made, saying that he may pull back some of that unallocated, unspent NEVI money, but that's not going to affect car dealers in any way, because where they're hopefully getting subsidies, it's coming from the utilities or coming from, different entities within the state. So I'm optimistic. My gut feeling is that it may just be a no change type of thing, really. The one offsets the other, but just one person's opinion.
Chris, what do you think?
I mean, I've talked to a few of the manufacturers in the past, this past week. And, I think I echo that sentiment with Bernie, where I think that they're very positive. Some people are not understanding what, Trump was looking to do, to be honest. So I think it's too early in the game to make any assumptions. Elon is definitely going to be in his ear, right? They're close friends. So I would assume Elon would not just allow him to go away with it. But, one thing is that the incentives really need to be hitting each state. And there was an article probably several weeks ago in the Miami Herald, where I live down here, and it talked about where'd the money go? Where is it? And people are starting to question it. I think that's the big part, which is going to boost charger sales. It's going to boost car sales once we have that money allocated in each state and it's being released. So right now, I don't see anything being negative. I see the same thing that Bernie's seeing, positivity. EV is here to stay. There's a lot of choices that are out there for cars. There's going to be more choices as the years go down the road. So I don't see any problem. It just comes down to what he was looking to do. And of course, Elon, I guess making sure that he, understands EV more than he may do today.
So I was in the industry back in 2016 when he was elected the first time around. And I remember the industry was, there was a lot of concern. People thought that the sky was falling. But really what happened was, while the federal government maybe pushed back on a lot of like the whether it's like EPA mandates or other mandates that are out there, what happened was utilities make, for every electric car that's sold, they make $400 a year on electricity costs on average. And so what we saw was a big push from utilities now realizing that, because the federal government wasn't pushing it as hard, they started supporting EVs more. And then the states that really were trying to push ZEV mandates decided to pick up the slack and come up with like state mandated solutions as opposed to federally mandated solutions. And it sort of accelerated the market in like a way, the industry or the world was fighting back on the notion that EVs weren't going to be the future. And so I just think that's going to happen again. And then obviously I think from Elon's perspective, obviously he's gotten Tesla to such a, strong, price point that it's going to put pressure on the rest of the market to continue to innovate. And you're actually seeing a lot of these auto manufacturers do that right now, come out with incredible vehicles, consistently lower price points as the cost of like lithium ion goes down. So I'm kind of like in the same boat. Like I don't really think it's a huge deal. I think things are going to continue to progress, maybe in a more organic, natural way than in a setting where subsidies existed that artificially impacted the market.
Yeah, I mean, I look at, Bernie and I have obviously been in LED lighting for a long, long time. And I'm sure Bernie can agree where in the early days of LED lighting, everybody was skeptical and it was something like it was a fad. That was a big word that we heard a lot. And then now look at LED lighting today. So it comes down to acceptance, understanding what it's about, and then taking it from point A and go to point B and step by step.
Yeah. And I'm sure the energy efficiency world has probably experienced a lot of this first. It was like that. And now we're getting into the EV space. And so this probably feels pretty familiar to you guys for sure.
Yeah, we've been living it for years and years.
Yeah, I bet. So Bernie, you and I have talked a lot about this, but I've always really admired you guys because I think the approach you guys, have taken as a company is pretty holistic. Like, yeah, you're doing the installs and that's important. And you've had a ton of experience doing it. Yeah, you can procure the equipment. That's awesome and extremely valuable. But I think you guys have in the energy efficiency world, I think you're focusing more on the entire picture of total cost of ownership and all the things that someone has to take into account when they're installing a piece of electrical equipment that probably creates the most unique load profile that exists, especially at a car dealership, which is the charging stations. And that's kind of how we ended up getting close, was this alignment of what the grander picture was and making sure that we were providing value to customers. So I guess my question to you is, can you talk about the partnership with EVready and why you think it makes sense?
Yeah, and as you mentioned, we do look at our name, Facilities Solutions Group, right? We try to be an overall provider of everything that goes into facilities, and our vertical integration has always been one of our biggest strengths. We're not tied into anything. We look at everything and how it goes together. Maybe we work on just one part of the picture sometimes, but having that whole holistic knowledge, as you use the term, has been important. And we're very involved with utility and energy efficiency programs throughout the country, many direct install programs. And when we go in to look at, at a facility, we're looking at cutting costs. If we're looking at energy, we're looking at impact. A lot of people are out there with a very singular focus, right? They want to sell you an EV charger. You need an EV charger, we're going to put it in. But what happens when you put that EV charger in, right? And what happens to energy usage? What happens to demand charges? And when we started talking, that's one of the things that I admired about EVready is that you guys have a wonderful knowledge of how things are all connected and how they impact each other. And of course, deep experience in the EV charging space, very, very good connectivity and understanding of the dealership network and how it operates. And so it makes a great partnership between our companies. We've done, and that was one of our first conversations. We were talking about several dealerships that in one particular state, there were such subsidies because the state wants to help car dealerships transition. And we were proposing to change, and we're executing on those projects now, by the way, all of the HVAC and the lighting in the buildings. And the state subsidies are covering 80% of the total installed cost. And that sticker shock, if you want to call it that, of all of a sudden when your demand charges go up and it so dramatically affects your electric bill, was being buffered out because we've been proactive and we've done that differently. So I think it makes a very, very strong combination with our two companies. And, it goes far beyond where a lot of people normally go. So
yeah, sorry.
No. I was going to say, turning it around a bit, your EVready Simplify and what you bring to the party. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about how you guys really, impacted through our conversations, how you really make that extra bit of difference out there for dealership.
Yeah. So I'll give you the summary really quickly, and then I want to point out an example that I think really it marries where you guys are experts and where we are. So we're a company built on what we call the inconvenient truths of the EV charging industry. There are factors tied to EV charging that dramatically impact station owners that are generally not discussed. And the place where we found these things is because we actually came from the center of the industry. Our team came from leadership within the EV charging industry over the past decade, and so we identified the main issues tied to EV charging procurement and installation that weren't a focus that really affected end users, and we built a business model around solving those problems that are generally not discussed. And so there's really three problems, and then there's three ways that we're solving it. One is called the biggest problem. One of the three biggest problems is a lack of strategy. It's the idea that you're sort of just putting in chargers to hit requirements or because somebody said that they need them, and you don't necessarily know the difference between the different types of software and the capabilities, the different types of hardware and the capabilities, the funding that might be available out there, how you should be future-proofing your site. And so what we created to solve that problem is the EVready playbook. It's a 10-year roadmap that's tailored to each individual location to help them understand how to lower their CapEx while also minimizing their total cost of ownership and their OpEx. And so that's what the playbook is. It just creates a strategy. And the cool thing about the playbook is it's not a static document. It's a live document. This industry is a moving target. It's a live document that's constantly updating, helping people understand how they need to invest right now and prepare for the future. Number two, total cost of ownership is generally ignored. So statistic, over the past couple of days, I've reviewed about 5 electric bills in the states of New Jersey, New York, and Massachusetts. Between the 3 states, 78 to 93% of all costs of delivery for electricity are tied to a specific thing that you referenced called demand charges. This is a really expensive thing on electric bills that can be avoided if you take the proper considerations from an installation perspective, from a planning perspective, from a software perspective. I would say 99% of car dealerships across the United States are paying thousands to tens of thousands of extra dollars in demand charges that can be avoided with the right solution, the right partner. And the Northeast is a great example. And so we actually have developed a software, we call it EVready Guardian, where we can help protect end users from getting hit with those excessive fees. It differs all over the country, but our software can manage that, and we can definitely help somebody understand their circumstance. The third piece is that without a strategy, scaling can become impossible, especially if you have several different car dealerships. And so we have a solution that we call EVready Manage that works with EVready Guardian, where we can create a centralized platform for different software providers where they can have visibility and control over their chargers, and we can assist them with all of their operational energy needs, and help with station support issues. And then in some cases, help them get checks in the mail back from the utility for participating in demand response programs across the United States. And so just kind of going back to the partnership, I love how you guys are so focused on the energy efficiency side, because those are the two pieces to the puzzle. There's energy efficiency, and then the rules by which you're charged for electricity. And both of those things need to be under control in order to minimize total cost of ownership. And combined, obviously, we are able to provide that. And I think New Jersey is a great example, because Bernie, you've told me so many times on the energy efficiency and lighting side how much funding there is available right now for those solutions. And then on the EV charging side, there's a significant amount of funding available, but also adverse utility circumstances that need to be addressed. And I think those markets are the ones where we'll be able to, help customers the most.
Well, it's funny because when we talk, to dealers, all sorts of auto dealers, and we go in, oftentimes people have a regret that they moved too fast and without really understanding everything that's involved. And I think you've experienced the same thing where, people will come back and say, I wasn't prepared for these additional demand charges, or I never even took advantage of some of the subsidies that were out there that were available to me, right? It's just, I did a quick knee-jerk reaction, if you will. And, one of the reasons I think that things that BMW liked about us, and in particular that I feel we bring to the party, we, like Chris mentioned, we don't, you're not having all different people doing different parts of things, right? You have a distributor selling you EV chargers, and they ship them all and put them in your service bay, and you have no room to move, or they drop a container, or they haven't really looked at demand response and what your impact of your equipment will be on there, or even people planning, and not preparing for the future, trying to perhaps save money up front, but maybe, putting the wrong equipment in that doesn't really do them justice in the forward, going forward and preparing. And I don't know if you have any other thoughts on like, just preparing for the future. That's one thing that we think a lot about and try to reuse. In some cases, I just had a call the other day, where we said that you don't need to rip out all this other equipment. It can serve a purpose. We can update it in some ways, or whatever. And what are your thoughts of what dealers really have to do to prepare?
Yeah. So I want to jump into this by saying, like, this is what I see first. So what I usually see is when dealers are putting in chargers, or maybe they want to do it, maybe they're required to do it. Usually what they do is they have a site assessment of some sort, and then if the chargers should go on the existing, if they can go on the existing service, they'll do that. And that's like generally, like, I think the process right now. What I would recommend is, like, that needs to be done. A site assessment needs to be done. There's no doubt about it. But I would recommend, instead of, and here's the other thing too. I think what a lot of dealers I see do is they have to put something in by, let's just call it July of 2025. And it seems like a nuisance right now. Maybe there aren't a ton of electric cars being delivered. It's really not a part of the business too much yet. And they haven't necessarily transitioned. And instead of planning right now, they'll kind of reach out to somebody in like February, March, April. But that gets tough, because then if you want to put in a new service, in many cases, the timelines across the United States for a new service are a year. So, you're kind of disqualifying yourself from a new service if it's required or economically beneficial in some way. And then you're kind of forced to make decisions quickly in a space that, might feel new. So my recommendation always to everybody is to start thinking about this, not just from a perspective of, hey, we need to get these installed, but all right, these have to get installed. What's the best way to do this? Is it on an existing service? Is it on a new service? Is there funding available? Does the funding get impacted whether it's on an existing or a new service? Is there a circumstance where I have to buy the chargers by a certain date? Okay, well, if I have to buy them by a certain date, does the funding get impacted by when I buy them? How much do I want to future-proof? Am I just looking to put in like the minimum amount? Or do I want to spend an extra 10 or 20% to make sure that I don't have to spend an extra 100% again in a couple of years? And then from the utility economics perspective, when we're talking about demand charges, how does whether you're installing on an existing service or a new service impact how the utility charges you for electricity? I know for certain in the Northeast that if you don't take this into consideration, you're talking like it's going to cost you $100,000 a year. In some instances, $300,000 a year, depending on what utility it's in. And so, align with your partner, figure out who the right company is that knows what they're doing, and begin a 12-month process. Don't think about this as a 3-month process. I think that would be my recommendation.
That's right. How many people have you encountered too, where they feel they had the extra time, but then funding changed or rebates changed, programs ran out of money, right? And now I'm ready. Well, guess what? You may be ready, but what you were going to get's not ready, and it's a year away again, or the bucket has to be refilled.
Yeah, and look, like every site's different. I know you know that too, Chris. I know you've experienced that. Every site's going to be different, so it's kind of tough to tell somebody, hey, this is exactly how much, how beneficial it is to start the process now versus later. But in general, across the United States, it's beneficial for the end user to make this a 12-month process instead of a 3-month process financially. Obviously, everywhere is a little bit different. And Bernie, I know the states you're referencing. Yep. And yeah, so like that's what we want to do together is we want to help people really. We want you to be able to hold as many cards as possible. And the way to do that is to initiate a process sooner than later to understand like what you're going to need 12 months from now. And so my question, my last question for you guys is, we kind of just talked about it, but in order to make the best decisions, in order to minimize total cost of ownership, what would you recommend that BMW dealers do in, November of 2024? Like, what is the next step?
Chris, did you want to take that one? Or?
Yeah, I mean, definitely contact us. We will answer any question you have. The first step is we have to go and take a look at the site, right? That's step number one. Looking at what's existing. What are we changing out? Do we have to upgrade service? Anything like that. So that's kind of what BMW dealerships need to do up front, is having us come in and take a look. And then from there, we know exactly what needs to be put in, right? If we're going to put some level 3s in there, or if we're going to put a few level 2s in there, it all depends on what type of power they have. So, I know that some of the dealerships that I've talked about over the past few months is, kind of just upgrading what they have, taking out some older units that they had and then putting in the new system that we have in there. So that's kind of where I see it. I mean, Bernie, you see anything else on your end?
Well, I mean, the dealers have received their recommendations from BMW, right? They look at what they have on there. And one thing I love about BMW's approach, they're not overbearing, right? But they do the market research in each market and they try to help the dealers. I mean, it's not just a one size fit all. And we've seen some of the manufacturers take that and it kind of has, backfired on them. But they really do look at your market and what they anticipate, because they're as bought into that as you are. And, while what I would suggest for people, there's, I'll take the 24 kW chargers. Right? Many of you are seeing BMW recommend that you start with some 24 kW chargers, and then, you work your way up to a larger charger. But the great thing, and I think that's one of the reasons that BMW chose us as one of the partners, they encourage us to tell the dealerships, what do we really think is appropriate? I just had a discussion with a dealer the other day, and he was due to put in a couple of 24 kW chargers, and we gave them, okay, what is really your option here? You could put in two 24 kW chargers or one 60 kW charger, and how would that serve you differently in the future? One of the reasons that BMW recommends the multiple 24 kW chargers is that if one were to go down, you would have another one available, right? But as you get into preparing for the future, you might want that 60 kW or maybe two of them, because it's going to give you a much faster charging rate when you need to deliver a vehicle. And if you're not limited now to just having one charger, you're going to have multiple chargers anyway. And so, that perspective to give you advice of, well, there's multiple paths, and why would you want to take one path over another? We like to think that we bring that as a team to BMW dealers and really support the philosophy of BMW corporate in doing the best thing for their dealership network.
And just for context for dealers, like additionally, so we were talking to a dealer, they want to install a 24 kilowatt charger. We recommended they install a faster charger. One of the other reasons why there is because generally 24 kilowatt chargers are not eligible for funding. That is usually the case across the United States. But the more, the charger that costs nominally more money was eligible for infrastructure costs being covered. And so the total project cost was actually less to get a better charger. And in many cases across the United States, that's how it's going to be. That's the information that we want to deliver to you together.
Yep. It's more than just selling a charger to you.
Yep.
That's for sure.
So at this is the end of the podcast. Within the podcast, in the notes, if you're a dealer and you've you heard the podcast, and you'd like to connect with us about your site and hear more about what we're talking about, there will be a link to schedule a consultation. So please click on that. We're looking forward to connecting with you and understanding the circumstances around your site, the investments you've made, the ones that you need to make, funding circumstances around it, utility economics, battery storage, whatever it might be that's critical for your site. We're going to make sure we're going to create a solid game plan for you. So Bernie and Chris, thank you so much for taking the time, and we will connect soon.
Thank you, Chris.
Very good. Thank you. And we have some case studies about BMW dealerships on our site, fsg.com/BMW, and you can learn more and see our welcome message.
Beautiful.
Thank you.